guys, welcome to Stats Online. Today we're going to be talking about samples and surveys. Today you're going to be able to explain how the aspects of a sample survey can lead to bias. And then also I want you to be able to explain how undercoverage and a non-response can also lead to bias. Okay guys, so even when samples are selected at random, there are other potential sources that can be biased in a survey. So nothing is really guaranteed. Let's first talk about undercoverage. So undercoverage occurs when some members of the population are less likely to be chosen or cannot be chosen for the sample. All right, so undercoverage definitely leads to bias. And when undercovered individuals differ from the population in ways that affect their responses. So let's go ahead and take a look at an example of what an undercoverage would look like. So here's a problem. What proportion of dogs are malnourished? Well, let's see. A veterinarian decides to examine the records of a random sample of 100 dogs that are enrolled in her practice and finds that 2% of these dogs are malnourished. Describe how undercoverage might lead to bias in this study. So let's talk about the undercoverage. Dogs that are enrolled in the veterinary practice are likely to have owners that take better care of them, right? On average. So because the samples that she did, her random samples of 100 included only dogs that were in the veterinarian practice, this is an estimate of a percentage of malnourished dogs is likely to be lower than an average taken somewhere else. Okay, so let's talk about a non-response. A non-response occurs when an individual chosen for the sample cannot be contacted or refuses to participate. That happens, right? I mean, how many times do you not answer the phone when someone wants to ask you a survey question? Well, I don't really think they do that anymore. Do they? I don't know. I don't get any, but I used to. A non-response leads to bias when individuals who can't be contacted or they refuse to participate, and they would respond differently from those who would participate. So obviously their voice matters. Even though they're not stating a voice, it matters for sure. Okay, so let's take a look at a problem that would involve a non-response. So how much do you make? That makes sense, right? At a recent alumni reunion for a large university, a survey about the annual income was given to 2,431 alums that attended the reunion. Of the 42 alums that responded, the mean income was $132,473. So they put it out there and only 42 responded. Describe how the non-response might lead to bias in this study. Well, definitely you only had 42, and so that mean isn't going to be 100%, well, not 100%. That mean is going to be a little far off, right? People who don't earn much, they might be embarrassed, and they might choose not to respond to the survey. That totally makes sense. But on the other hand, so does the people who make a whole lot of money. They probably don't want to share their financial success and throw it out there and write down, I make $1 million a year. And so that one's pretty difficult to just throw it out there to whoever would like to respond. So this is definitely going to be a bias in this study, and it is definitely a non-response. Okay, so let's talk about a response bias. This is the third and final example for today. In a response bias, it occurs when there is a consistent pattern of inaccurate responses to a survey question. Well, you could think about it as someone not telling the truth. That's a very real possibility. You can talk about the characteristics of the interviewer, like someone who's interviewing. Would they influence the answer from the person who's answering? The way that they word the question, definitely they could be untruthful, and many other factors that could lead to a response bias. So you're probably thinking, what kind of study would guarantee no bias whatsoever? We'll get to that. All right, so let's look at a problem of a response bias. So what percent of police officers break the speed limit more than 3 times last week on their drive to work. Ooh. So a police officer surveys a random sample, right, of 100 attendees at the police officers convention and finds that 7% of the respondents said yes. So explain how the response bias might affect the survey and explain the unlikely direction of the bias. It's got to be low. It's got to be higher than 7%, right, guys? Yeah, so many officers would probably be embarrassed. I mean, they swore, they did an oath that they would abide by the law, so it's not like they want to say, yeah, I break the law, right? So definitely the sample proportion is less likely to be true, and it's it's going to be less than the 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 sample proportion is less than what it would be without that bias. Okay, so completely avoiding bias when conducting a survey is likely impossible. But there are ways that thoughtful researchers can keep bias to a minimum, and selecting a random sample is always a good start. So take steps to avoid undercoverage, non-response, and response bias can definitely make your surveys even better. So I hope you guys really enjoyed today's lesson, and I will see you next time. Bye.